Okay, so we have our upper and lower casts mounted as per bite registration. We've programmed an articulator according to our protrusive bite. Conduit inclination at 25. We're just going to use it as a standard. We plugged it into our little formula, L equals H over 8 plus 12, and we get a bended angle of 15 adjusted here, okay? So the maxillary bite block that we utilized intraorally established the vertical dimension of occlusion for the upper as well as the plane of occlusion. So we need to recreate this plane of occlusion on our master casts. All that. Okay. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to utilize this flat setup plate and some base plate wax on the lower cast, and we're going to establish our plane of occlusion. So a couple of things we need to consider here. Let's get my Bunsen burner going. We're going to soften some wax and roll it just like we did before, making the occlusal rim. And we're going to adapt it on our lower master cast. So I'm just going to fold this over all the way through. We're going to use the whole base plate wax. Make sure you introduce ample heat to soften the wax thoroughly so you have good working time with it so it doesn't get too cold on you. So I'm just going to roll it, make sure there's no air bubbles in between each roll. It's not a big deal at this point, but it's just a good habit to get into. And as you get to the end of the wax, you can hold it from this way and hold it over your flame so you don't burn your fingers. And I'm going to adapt the wax centered over the ridge. So it's nice and soft. And I'm going to displace the wax all the way to each side of the ridge, down to the vestibules, all the way down. And from here, we're going to take our setup plate, put the hole towards the back of the cast, try to center it in the middle, somewhere here. Just kind of cut off this little excess here. And now I'm going to close the articulator until the pin touches. There we go. And now I can push it further back and maybe line up this little corner here with the midline. We'll push it all the way back until this portion of the setup plate touches the model, or very close to it. Okay. And then I'm going to squish the sides to make sure that we have complete adaptation and support of the wax up against the setup plate. We're going to let this cool a little bit. Don't be too anxious to work with it because it will collapse and it'll start changing. The wax is not going to stick to your model, even if your models are dry. I'm going to cut off this little bit here. And ideally, the posterior portion of your upper wax rim is going to be in line with halfway up the retromolar pad. So this reestablishes our plane of occlusion. A couple of other things that we can mark on this plate as the wax is cooling down. I'm going to outline, just want to wipe off this little wax residue here. I'm going to outline the labial contour of my maxillary occlusal rim on my setup plate. And that's simply done by just taking a pencil and outlining the labial contour. I'm not too concerned with the buccal contour right now because that could change depending where we set up our teeth. But I'll go all the way just to give me a reference point. So you're going to have something like this. There's the labial contour that you establish in the patient's mouth. The other thing that we can outline on our setup plate is the midline. Make sure you do it correctly so you're not deviating from what you've started off with. There's my midline. The other thing that we can outline is our cuspid lines. So there's the cuspid lines there. So there's a lot of information on this setup plate that I can utilize to help me with my setup. And depending on the concept, setup concept, you might start with your upper interiors and follow with your upper posteriors and then work your way to the bottom. Some people do it a little bit differently. We're going to follow by setting up all of our upper teeth first, and then we'll move on to the lower when we start working with, start considering working and balancing. Okay? The other thing we can do here, I'm just going to let this wax cool off a little bit. Before I take it off, I'm going to seal the wax or the wax support that I created for my setup with some heated wax. I'll just use my font stock. I like using the number 7, but I'll just use the font stock for now. So I'm just going to heat up my font stock and make sure that I seal this wax wafer that I produced here to the setup plate so it doesn't come loose. Because we're going to be removing this lower setup plate multiple times when we get to the posterior teeth to verify certain positions of those teeth. And I want to make sure that it's held in place. You can certainly do it on the lingual side too when you remove it. But for now, that's pretty good. Okay, a couple of other things that we can outline on our master cast. So I'm going to remove this, and I just want to show it to you. It's got a nice support. It fills in the vestibule quite nicely, and I'm maximizing the support area as well. So I can set that off to the side. The other thing we can do here on our master cast is outline once again our retromolar pads. And outline the halfway point as well. Because that's an important landmark in terms of where we start placing our teeth. And of course, the crest of the ridge as well. on each side. Okay. So this line here that I'm drawing here on the crest of the ridge, I'm going to take an average straight line. We've done this before with our occlusal rims, and extend it all the way to the land area right here. And do the same thing on the other side. I'll just turn it around a little bit. And this line is reflective of the central fossa of the lower posteriors, because we want those lower posteriors to be over the crest of the ridge as much as possible to enhance the stability of the lower denture. Okay? So now I can put my setup plate back on here. And I can use my ruler to join those two lines together. So I have a line back here over the crest of the ridge, and I have another one here at the interior portion of the land area. And again, this is a guide. It's not set in stone or anything like that. That indicates the crest of the lower ridge, and also on the other side. You might be off one way or another with this line, but again, it's just a guide. Okay? The other thing that we can outline on our setup plate is the midpoint between the retromolar pads. So if I take my ruler like so, and I'll divide the distance into half, right there, and I'll make a halfway point, and now I can join the midpoint here according to the midline and back here. Let's see what we have. We should have two equal parts here. They don't exactly look equal. One looks a little bigger than the other. Would you agree? Looks a little bigger than the other. So I might have made a mistake somewhere, and I think I'm kind of looking back at it now. I think this line here could be a little more towards the buckle. That looks a little more symmetrical now. And again, this is just a guide. Okay? So there's a lot of things that we have here that we can start incorporating the teeth. I have my facial contour, I have my crest of my ridge, and I have a sense of symmetry here where I need to go with this, because you cannot have balanced occlusion, and we're going to talk a little more about balanced occlusion in the videos to come, without symmetry. And we need to at least visualize it at this point, make sure that we're on the right track, regardless what the models look like and how they oppose each other. So if I take this bite block off now and close my articulator to my vertical dimension, it looks like the upper ridge is parallel to the plane of occlusion. And it looks like the setup plate, if we look at it from a frontal view, I'll just take the pin out just to give you a better view. It looks like the setup plate is somewhat parallel to the hinge axis of the articulator. It's not over tilted one way or another. Okay?